Good morning, everybody. I'm Deputy Mayor Lindsay Appiah. I'm joined today by Chief Pamela Smith, the staff at the Training Academy, and the Police Executive Research Forum to talk about new training methods to support our officers. We're at the Metropolitan Police Department's Tactical Training Center, as Chief Smith will tell us more about the specifics of this program known as Communications and Assessment and Tactics Training, or ICAT. Every sworn member of the Metropolitan Police Department will take place in this training in 2024. It'll also become a part of MPD's overall curriculum for every recruit officer that comes through the academy. The training is being provided by the Police Executive Research Forum at no cost to MPD. Whether it's bystander training, which prepares officers to intervene in situations with their peers, to the opening of the MPD Cadet Corps Training Center last fall, or their unique partnership with UDC and the National Museum of African American History and Culture, we're proud that MPD has always been a leader when it comes to training. Certainly, it's clear why investing in training is important, and there's multiple reasons. One, you've heard us talk about the importance of good constitutional policing, and we believe that investing in our people is a key way in which we serve our community, as they're the people on the front lines doing so. So good policing is a pillar of our public safety strategy. We also believe that it's important to invest in good partnerships, and so partnerships like the one that you are here to hear us talk about with the Police Executive Research Forum is important, but you also heard us 2 weeks ago stand with Mayor Bowser and announce the establishment of a real-time crime center, which is really a furtherance of our partnerships with our federal, local, and regional partners to advance our ability to do good policing as well. The third thing that you've heard us talk a lot about this year, and that you're going to continue to hear us and speak about and to see proposals, is on good policy. Certainly you've heard the mayor say repeatedly that it's important that we have a policy environment that supports good policing and that supports accountability. And so you'll hear from us continuing to put forth policies that allow us to do that, and also to calling on council to move quickly on those. Certainly right now, you know, pending are the Safer, Stronger Amendment Act and the Act Now Amendment Act. And so we are hopeful and expectant that council will continue to partner with us in advancing public safety in our city by helping us to move forward in these areas: good partnerships, good policing, and good policy. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Smith to talk more about the ICAT training specifically and the impact it will have on MPD.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I'm Pamela Smith of the Metropolitan Police Department here in Washington, D.C. The Metropolitan Police Department prides itself on our training and has been looked at as a model among many agencies across the country. Our goal is to ensure officers have the best knowledge, skills, and resources to address the challenging situations they encounter on a day-to-day basis. While teaching our officers various skills and tactics for communications and de-escalation is not new, and it has been part of our many past trainings over many years, I'm pleased to announce the next year, in 2024, we will take that training a step further by adopting the 16-hour integrating communications, assessment, and tactics training program known as ICAT as part of our 2024 professional development training. The ICAT training, which is seen as a national best practice recommendation for this type of training and similar to our past adoption of ABLE, active bystandership for law enforcement, leveraging national best practice training programs ensures our officers have top-notch curriculum in their training. The ICAT training is focused on diffusing situations involving persons in crisis. Between 2022 and the end of this year, every MPD officer has completed a 2-day mental health first aid training or has been certified as a crisis intervention officer. This collaboration with Dr. Bazran and the Department of Behavioral Health has helped better equip our officers to respond to people who are dealing with behavioral health challenges. What we know is that we want our officers to demonstrate empathy, passion, and care, but also to not be afraid to take the necessary law enforcement actions in order to protect our community. The goal of ICAT is not to eliminate police uses of force, but to provide our officers additional skills that allow them to handle a range of critical incidents safely and successfully. The ICAT training will focus on 4 areas that are crucial for our officers in the field. 1, it will emphasize the response of patrol officers in situations involving erratic behavior, often due to mental illness or behavioral crisis. Secondly, ICAT will address incidents where a subject is unarmed or armed with a weapon other than a firearm. Unlike situations with firearms, these incidents often allow officers time and opportunity to consider a range of responses. And thirdly, ICAT integrates crisis recognition, intervention, communications, and tactics with individuals in crisis. This part of the training really builds upon our mental health first aid training and uses an integrated approach aligned to our existing use of force policy, helping officers to develop and think through their options in challenging non-firearms incidents. And lastly, ICAT centers on officer safety and wellness and equips officers with tools, technique, and skills to protect themselves both physically and from emotional harm of lethal force encounters. I would like to thank the Police Executive Research Forum Director Chuck Wexler, who has joined us today, for their support in launching this training and providing at no cost to the Metropolitan Police Department the Train the Trainer facilitation, and for their continued support of our department. Chuck works with agencies all across the country, and his support here in the District of Columbia is greatly appreciated. While talking about the program is beneficial, I know that today's scenarios, which you will have an opportunity to see, will help put this training into perspective. You will get to see how this program will benefit our community, and today you will get to see the few examples of the type of scenarios our officers will encounter while in training. I will now take a few questions. Good morning.
For On Topic, it says here that this 16-hour course was developed by the PERF following unrest in 2014-2015. Why adopt this now so many years after?
Well, I think it's important that as we think about our training just in totality, we should always be looking for opportunities where we can increase and enhance our training. And right now is the time that we've partnered, if you will, with PERF in order to ensure that we are providing our officers with the best training, but not only the best training, but training that is national best practices across the U.S. And this is the time for us to make sure that we are engaging our officers with the communities in a way that's a lot safer than what we've seen in that 2014, 2015, 16 time period.
And then can you share any stats that would show the impact that this could have? How many incidents like this are police responding to a year or something like that?
We should be able to get some stats to you at a later date. I don't have them in front of me today, but certainly I'll get them to you.
Clearly this is something that you feel needs to be addressed.
Absolutely. I think it's something that is necessary for our officers to have additional tools in order to do their jobs effectively. As we continue to engage with the community every single day, and when we come in contact with them, when we come in contact with individuals who are suffering from mental crisis, I want our officers to have the best training and the best tool in order to address that.
Something that the city's seeing more and more of now?
I can't say that right off the top of my head, but I will say is that when we do encounter it, they will have the tools in order to address it.
Okay. A couple off topic when you're ready, but I know.
Okay. Good morning.
Good morning, Chief. So, do you know how many of your officers are currently crisis intervention trained and sort of have had the 40 hours of crisis intervention training?
All of our officers have received that training. The majority, I think about half of our officers have received it.
About half of them.
Yes.
So do you intend to have that be 100%? Is there a goal?
That is accurate.
Do you know what the timeline for that?
I don't know the timeline for that right off the top of my head, but we do plan to ensure that all of our officers have received that training.
But the timeline for this is by the end of next year.
That's when we begin the training in 2024.
But by the end of 2024, you would have, the deputy mayor is nodding in accord, that you would have completed all 4,000, whatever.
3,000 and change.
Whatever.
3,331.
We're hopeful, right?
We're hopeful,
we're
yes,
hopeful.
sir. Yes,
Okay.
sir. I mean, there's a lot of training that goes on in the Metropolitan
Right.
Police Department,
So-
but certainly we're hopeful.
So can you tell us the difference between the crisis intervention training that's been ongoing since 2009, that half the officers already have, and this training?
Well, this training really helps us to look at the in-depth, if you will, the tactics, the communication, the integration of the, I'm sorry? Oh, of the training that they'll get in this in comparison to what they got before, which was really just a crisis intervention piece. This will really be more engaged in the tactics piece, the communication piece, and the integration piece. And so I think this is an opportunity for us to not just provide one area of training that we want to focus on, because if you recall, many years ago, we had a lot of engagement across the country, if you will, where we mental health consumers, and we wanted to make sure that our officers had the best tools in order to address those kinds of engagement. And this is just going to enhance that. Yes, sir.
Chief, you say that one of the points is the communication. So some Hispanic population, they don't speak English, and they have some mental crisis. So what will be, or the agents will be to address, to try to speak with them in their language, or how will be this training?
And that is a very good question. And what I will say is that we have a special liaison branch where we do work with our Hispanic, Latino population and our Asian communities. And we will make sure that there's an opportunity for our special liaison branch to make community members to have that information so that they can speak to our Latinos and Hispanics so that we can speak in that various language. Yes, sir.
Good morning. So who specifically is carrying out or is teaching this over the course of next year? And whoever's teaching it, have they been trained yet? What's the protocol around that?
PERF will provide the training at no cost. What will happen is there will be a train the trainer facilitation workshop that will take place where we will have our officers trained specifically to train our officers.
How many officers?
I'm sorry?
How many officers will be trained?
We have not determined that at this moment, but trust me, they will go through the facilitated training as needed in order to ensure that we train the rest of the workforce, which is typically what we do in most of our training, with most of our training.
And how do you take into account racial bias in the course of the training, you know, in terms of just meeting people on the street and determining how bias, of course, may affect how they interact with the subjects?
Well, as part of our curriculum, we more than oftentimes teach about racial biases and biases, not just within the police department, but also within our communities. And we will continue to ensure that that's a part of this training as well. Yes, sir.
Chief, there was a part of the act now has proposing changes to amend the verbiage regarding the chokehold. You mentioned it then that it was like more so that you had some officers that were hesitant to have a hands-on approach because of the change of the verbiage. How does this training play into that change that you want to see in the act now legislation?
Well, when you talk about the officers having a kind of a hands-off approach, it's more about the incidental contact around the neck. With regards to the Act Now legislation that's being proposed. In this case, it would not be any different. I think our officers know that when this will be actually a little bit different in that we want them to use the appropriate communication, being able to engage with the folks that are in crisis. But then the other piece of it is that if there are tactics to be used, we want to ensure that they have the appropriate tactics that are going to be used in order to take care of that particular individual.
In the last congressional hearing that was about regarding DC crime overall, some of the first responders for fire were able to kind of share their perspective of how some situations have become more dangerous. Can you share that about your officers as well? How, responding to these scenes where you potentially have somebody having a crisis is also, playing out in your department? What
I can say is that our officers have done a phenomenal job, especially since a lot of them have had the crisis intervention training. We've done a really great job with being able to de-escalate a lot of our interactions with folks who are having mental health crisis. And we will continue in that same vein, and this training is only going to enhance us in that space. Stephanie?
Thanks, Chief. I want to ask about the Chanel situation. Can you give us an update on what happened there, and just to follow up, a couple follow-ups to that, please?
So our officers responded to 955 I Street on last night at the response of sounds of gunshots. When they arrived, they discovered that individuals had entered the Chanel location, and one was armed with a fire extinguisher. That individual deployed the fire extinguisher, and at some point during that time period, the individuals ran into the store, took the merchandise that was in the store, and what I have been what has been shared with me is that while they were engaged in leaving the store, the SPO ended up discharging his firearm. And there was no property damage, there was no injuries to anyone, and I think we put a lookout for a white sedan.
That vehicle has not been recovered yet.
Not at this moment, but we do have a lookout for that particular.
So we've been reporting other cities have been dealing with these flash robberies, you know, at a very large level, and it looks like you're starting to see more of that in DC.
Well, we're not starting to see more of that. I mean, that's the one incident that I can recall within the last 6 or 7 months, but we are certainly increasing our presence in those spaces, making sure we are remaining vigilant, working with the stores and looking at how they have postured their security plans.
If that does increase here, what is the guidance, and especially when it comes to the level of crime in the city and the number of crimes being committed by people wearing masks? Are you telling folks, if you're wearing, you know, or telling store owners and business owners and security members, if they're wearing masks, don't let them in? Can you speak to that?
What I will say is that, you know, I've visited the area in city center, and what you will find is that there are a lot of special police officers assigned to those areas. In some of the stores, they also have their own police officers, SPOs, part-time officers that are there. And our expectation is that certainly they manage and monitor that. You know, in the Act Now legislation, that's one of the things that we have proposed in order to address individuals who are wearing masks. And our guidance to them is, again, we will work with them as best we can to ensure that they have good security posture in place.
Thank you for raising that.
Yes,
We did
ma'am.
report on that as well. Philadelphia, for example, though, is looking at banning masks in certain public spaces. Is that something you feel needs to be done here in the city?
We have not had a discussion around that. I think our first approach is what the mayor and the deputy mayor proposed to the city council with regards to the anti-mask law, and right now that's where we are, and we're hoping to get that passed.
All right, back on topic slightly, if you don't mind. The PERF representative, if I could ask a question of them real quick.
Is that okay? Chuck?
All right, so as far as the practices in this training, what was the research that went into it to determine its effectiveness in, you know, reaching the goal of safely taking in suspects?
We've been working on this for 9 years, actually. It goes back to the period when the Washington Post was looking at their 1,000 officer-involved shootings, the Ferguson case in Michael Brown, researching this in England where they don't use firearms, bringing 25 police chiefs to Scotland, doing 7 pilot sites, spending days with the emergency service unit of the NYPD, bringing 30 police officers into NYPD, testing it, having the University of Cincinnati evaluate it, showing a reduction in use of force, injuries to officers and suspects. Does that help?
It does.
Thank you.
Chief, if I could first just one follow-up on the Chanel story. So the special officer, did he fire his weapon at the suspects or in the air? We heard it was not effective, but do you know the circumstances under which he's fired that weapon?
That's still under investigation, Mark. I can't say whether he fired it at them or whether he fired it in the air. I do know that our officers responded due to the sounds of a gunshot.
And then if I could ask about the synagogue and the gas spraying, what can you tell us about what the individual, the suspect, actually said? Where there's some stuff that's been floating around as quotes. Can you give us some specificity on what he said and whether or not you've determined or you believe that this was a hate crime?
Well, first of all, it's still under investigation, and I am not aware of the specific anti-Semitic phrase that was used. It's still under investigation. As you know, Mark, whenever we have these types of situations, the U.S. Attorney determines whether or not it's a hate crime or a bias crime. So at this point, what I can say to you is that he was arrested and charged with simple assault and resisting arrest.
Do you know what the spray was that he had, that he deployed?
I do not know the exact accelerant that he used.